So what makes me cranky about John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum? The John Wick has become so overpowered that he's essentially suffering from the Dragon Ball Z power scaling problem now. That is to say, he's become so strong that he's basically invincible, which means the only way for a villain to be a threat to him is for them to be even more ridiculously overpowered than he is. That then doubles back on itself because now the villain is too strong for John to survive, so they just have to sort of ignore every opportunity to kill John long enough for him to kill them instead. And that's incredibly unfortunate because John Wick wasn't invincible in the first movie. He was an incredibly skilled and determined assassin who could take a lot of punishment and clearly outclass the average everyday mafia henchman getting between him and his revenge, but he was still mortal. You still had a sense that one of them could get in a lucky shot, or that one of his fellow assassins might be able to take him out. But by the end of John Wick 2, he'd been hit by cars and walked away unscathed, killed half of the elite henchmen on the planet, defeated 2 assassins of similar ability, and picked up a suit that is quite literally bulletproof, so it had really stretched that suspension of disbelief and begun to undermine any real sense of danger he might be facing. But that movie very cleverly reset the power dynamic at the end by kicking him out of the Super Assassin Club, taking away his toys, and putting him up against a world full of his peers. Unfortunately, John Wick 3 kind of squanders that reset. Most of his peers are treated as just as much of a joke as the Mafia guys were in the first movie. Wick just mows them down. Nobody really makes any headway until the guys with the bulletproof armor show up, and even then, John is still tearing through them like butter. So by the end of the movie, he's got opponents who are practically magic, but that treat the fight more like a sparring session than a deathmatch, because otherwise they'd very easily kill him even with his nigh invincibility. Considering what's on the line at that point in the film, it's pretty unsatisfying for the bad guys to just start pulling their punches and letting John get back up just so that the fight can continue. It also really undercuts all of the amazing stunt choreography to watch a guy intentionally refrain from stabbing John in the back, like this were The Last Jedi or something. I can understand if a dude takes a couple extra seconds to get up after having been tossed into something so that John has time to incapacitate his existing opponent and turn to intercept the next attack, but it's really distracting to see a bad guy who supposedly has the intent to kill John just not go for the kill shot when they have it. I guess that's what makes John Wick the deadliest assassin in this universe. He'll keep using lethal force until he's sure the guy is dead, and then do it one more time just in case. That stunt work still puts pretty much every other Hollywood action movie to shame, though. It's unbelievably refreshing to watch a movie with long, steady, wide shots of each fight where the actors are clearly doing the fighting. I wish that trend would spread throughout the film industry the way that the hyper-edited shaky cam crap from Jason Bourne did. Watching John Wick films really makes me long for the days before that became a thing. Then on top of being beautifully shot and edited, the action is just as, if not more creative than the last 2 movies. John Wick can kill a guy with a horse just as easily as he can kill a guy with a pencil, for example. We even get some canine-inspired revenge, which really makes you feel for the poor stunt guys who had to take a dog to the crotch for the sake of a badass action scene. I don't know how Keanu Reeves is still doing this at his age, but damn if it doesn't look good. And while her time in the movie isn't especially long, kudos to Halle Berry for pulling off an incredible action sequence of her own. Almost makes up for Catwoman. Almost. Her character helps open up the world a little more from John Wick 2 as well, which itself had very smartly expanded upon this whole underground assassin hotel thing. John Wick 3 does get a little more confusing in that regard, though, as if they couldn't quite decide how they wanted to get John through this latest mess, which is the only other real criticism I have of John Wick 3. They try to establish some hierarchy to this whole assassin world, but for a universe that seems almost entirely based on favors and reputation, it's really strange for the biggest of bads to act the way they do towards their subordinates. Decades of loyal and effective service are essentially tossed out the window because people were willing to use the gray areas around the rules to help John out, and that just seems silly, particularly given his reputation and the actual events of John Wick 2. One would think that it would have quickly become common knowledge that Santino had used John as a fall guy, so his fellow board members, or whatever the hell they are, would write the whole thing off with John's excommunicado order. Instead, they treat everyone who helped him like traitors and start punishing them for showing him leniency of any kind, even though the last 2 films seem to indicate that the entire system hinges on favors, so that should be an easy excuse. I think it would have been much more interesting if John being excommunicado had created like a schism in the Assassins Are Us, with people who owe or otherwise want to help John lining up against the people who are interested in taking him out, rather than having the people at the top bizarrely interested in reasserting their dominance when it wasn't really challenged in the first place. So ultimately, the story isn't as tight and the world building isn't quite as good, but those guys still have a stunt reel for the ages. That means it's worth going to the theater to see, and I'll still say see it at full price, if for no other reason than to encourage Hollywood to imitate these kinds of stunt sequences in the future. That's what I thought about John Wick 3 anyway. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like since that's our secret currency here on YouTube. And if you'd like to see more reviews, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and see you again next time.